Hello and welcome to Narayana IS. I am Pratik, your faculty for Indian Polity. Students, in the last two sessions, we discussed two chapters. And which are the two chapters? The first one was Historical Foundations of the Indian Society, wherein we dived into the history to understand the historical development with respect to polity and governance. We understood how the governance model it evolved over a period of time. Then we understood the features of the society, what all influences society, right? The challenges in society, characteristics of society. Why? Because the laws, the institutions, right? All the political concepts that we discuss or will be discussing is meant for the society. So polity and governance is meant for the society. So it is important to understand the society so that you can frame the laws better, so that the laws, the actions you take are in alignment with the needs of the society. Now, today we are going to start with the third chapter. So, these are the two chapters that we completed, right? Now, today we'll be starting with political theories and key concepts, right? So, let us begin. Let's try to understand what this topic is all about, or why do we study political theory and its concepts. Now students, human beings are unique. When I say unique, which means with respect to their ability to reason, reflect on their actions and communicate complex ideas. Which means reason. For example, why do human beings need freedom? How the power should be distributed? Why the human beings have to be equal? Why the human beings need freedom? What kind of government the society should adopt? What kind of governance models the society needs to have? Which means human beings are unique. They have the ability to reason what is good for me, what is bad for me, what is good for the society, what kind of governance mechanism should exist in the society. So they are unique in their ability to reason and also reflect on the actions taken. For example, as part of governance policy making, right? Policies are framed and then actions are taken. Tomorrow, once you be or once you clear the examination, right, you need to implement the policies taken by the government. So when you take the action, it also gives you a chance to reflect on your actions taken. And that's the reason human beings are unique, because they have the ability to reason, right? Reason things. And then political theory. Political theory. This concept originates from these fundamental human capacities. Capacities like to think, to reason, and then political theory, right? So political theory, it originates from where? From this fundamental human capacities. And it also seeks to answer critical questions about society, how the society should be, how the governance should be, and most importantly, political theory also tries to understand the relationship between the individual and the state, between the individual and the state. And that's the reason human beings are unique. And political theory, right? Theory tries to explore essential concepts such as freedom. Which are the key concepts? Freedom, equality, justice, power. So, political theory tries to examine these concepts. And political theory also examines how these values are reflected or manifested in institutions such as parliament, the state legislative assembly, governance, that is, the art of governing a society, laws made by the institutions, and everyday life. Political theory tries to examine how these values can be reflected in the institutions or the laws the parliament makes for us. Which means the political theory offers a framework for evaluating policies and political events. For example, freedom. We all need freedom, we all want freedom. But whether the policies the government is framing is reflecting the vision of freedom. So, be it freedom, be it equal, be it social justice, be it welfare. So, all these values should be reflected in the political or institutions, or let's say the laws the institution frames. So, this is what political theory is about. So, and what is the primary objective? What is the primary objective of political theory? The objective of political theory is to train citizens to think critically. The objective is to train citizens to think critically, which essentially means that what is good for the society, what is not good for the society, and also assess the political developments. So, by studying political theory, you will be in a position to understand what all things are good for the society and what all things are not good for the society. For example, the Citizenship Amendment Act that was framed in the year 2019. Whether citizenship should be given on the basis of religion or it should not be given on the basis of religion. Now, studying political theories or concepts such as these, it will help you understand whether the laws, the decisions, the acts the government makes or drafts is good for the society or is not good for the society. Uniform civil code, whether it is good for the society, it is not good for the society. So this is what the primary objective of political theory is. I hope you understood the introduction to the political theories and key concepts. So human beings are unique, right? Which means they have the ability to reason, reflect on their actions and communicate complex ideas. And political theory, it is the foundation of the human capacities. Capacity like freedom, equality, to think about freedom, to think about equality. Political theory builds on the capacities of human beings. Now, let us try to understand what is politics. Now, whenever we hear the word politics, it is often associated with what? It is often associated with elections, often associated with elections, political parties. This is what we understand by the term politics. It is elections, political parties, or governance. But the meaning of politics is much beyond elections, political parties, and governance. If I talk about the public perception of politics, what is the public perception of politics? Is it positive or is it negative? We all know what is the answer. So the public perception of politics is that it is mired in political scandals. Each day we get to hear so many political scandals, corruption. So some people say that politics is synonymous to corruption. Party defection, which means changing from one political party to another political party, and personal ambition, that is to seek for your growth, not for the growth of the country. Politics, you need to enter politics for contributing to the society, for helping our country, and not for personal ambition. This is what people understand, or this is the perception people have about politics, and that's the reason citizens do not engage or do not participate in the politics. Do not participate in the politics. But what Mahatma Gandhi said, what did he say? He said that politics, it is in every part of life, every aspect of life. Politics, it envelops every aspect of life. And no society can function without some form of political organization. This is what Mahatma Gandhi said. Politics is part of our day-to-day life. You cannot isolate politics. You cannot isolate politics because it affects your day-to-day life. So what is the core function of politics? Core function is collective decision making. Politics involves collective decision making for the greater good of the society. And for that, we have what is collective decision making is the core function of politics. For that, political institutions, which institutions? We have governments, then we have the bureaucracies, the IS, IPS, then we have the legal system, the judiciary. These institutions play a very, very important role in resolving the conflicts and taking the decisions This is the core function of politics, collective decision making. Right. Then if I talk about politics beyond government, which means politics also extends to non-government spaces. Non-government spaces. And which are these non-government spaces? We have families, workplaces, then workplaces. These are non-government spaces, civil society. And here in the non-government spaces, negotiations, they shape interaction. The way we negotiate, the way we talk, it shapes the interaction. For example, the policies the government frames, it influences economic growth, education, and also social life. Which means politics, it is linked to your day-to-day life, because the laws or policies, decisions that are taken, it is affecting, it is influencing economic growth, education, as well as welfare of the society. And what is the impact of governance, or let's say politics? If we focus on governance or good politics, it can improve public services. It can improve public services. For example, better education system, better infrastructure, roads, railways, highways, environment. This is the impact of good governance. And the other side, corruption, it will disrupt the lives of people. If the government is, or the governance is inefficient, is mired in corruption, then people will suffer. And what about the citizen participation? We discussed that because of the negative perception, people do not participate. But citizens have a very, very important role to play in politics. Why? Because because citizens have the ability to shape the policies, to influence the decision making of the government. How? You can form an association. You can organize protests against the government, like the protests were held against the CAA Act or against the farm laws. We can participate in the elections. This is how we can influence the decision making. So, when it comes to citizens' participation, the ability to what? Question, challenge, and hold the government accountable. And hold the government accountable is very, very important. And this is only possible when the citizens participate. When the citizens participate in politics. I hope you understood by the term what is politics. In short, it is collective decision making. Now, let us try to understand what do we study in political theory. In short, we understood what do we study. We study key concepts such as freedom, equality, right? Now, let's try to understand the scope of political theory. The political theory, right, as a discipline, it examines values and principles. It examines values and principles. Which values and principles? Freedom, equality, justice, power. And these values and principles, it shapes political life, it shapes public life. So political theory, it explores fundamental questions, like we discussed in the first slide. It explores fundamental questions about how the power should be distributed, whether power should be given to the local government, what kind of justice we need to have, retributive justice or restorative justice. Retributive justice, which means if a person has made a mistake, punish him. If a person has murdered, kill him, give him capital punishment, give him, hang him. And restorative justice is to correct that person. Restorative justice understands the fact that a person who has committed a mistake has committed because of certain circumstances. Now, restorative justice tries to improve that person and then integrate back into the society. Rehabilitation. Then what kind of rights the citizens should have? So, political theory, it explores fundamental questions about power, justice, rights. And these concepts like power, justice, freedom, equality, these concepts are actually drawn from whom? Major political thinkers like we discussed about Plato, Aristotle, Rousseau, Karl Marx, Mahatma Gandhi, Ambedkar. So these actually political scholars have contributed, and their contribution has led to the emergence of values and principles like power, justice, freedom, equality. So this is what political theory examines, what it examines, values and principles. Now if I talk about the Indian constitution, right, the Indian constitution has various political principles and values. For example, the Indian constitution has values such as liberty, right? The preamble, we have the word liberty, equality, fraternity, secularism, social justice, and many of these, political principles have evolved through centuries of philosophical debates. These concepts have evolved through centuries of philosophical debates and political debates, whether people should have, like whether how the power should be, whether it should be in the hand of one person or whether the common people should elect a leader. And if I talk about the contribution of political thinkers, which political thinkers? We have Plato and Aristotle, right? Plato and Aristotle. Now, Plato and Aristotle, these two scholars, they debated whether the society should have monarchy or democracy, especially in ancient Greece. So they deliberated on monarchy and democracy. If I talk about Rousseau, Rousseau emphasized on the concept of freedom. Rousseau says that freedom is the fundamental human right, which means a person cannot live without freedom. If I talk about Karl Marx, we all know about Karl Marx. What did Karl Marx emphasize? He emphasized economic inequality, which means there should be no class distinction, economic equality. He removes the concept of private property. And then if I talk about Dr. Ambedkar, he advocated for the concept of rights for the marginalized communities, which means constitution should add certain safeguards to protect the marginalized communities like Dalits, women, children, etc. And talking about key political concepts, which are the key political concepts like political, I am talking about political concepts like what kind of democracy should a society have, rule of law, separation of power. So these are the political concepts that political theory tries to clarify or explore more. Right? Now application, now political theory also examines how these principles, how these principles operate in real world institutions, that is, in reality, how this prince, for example, liberty as a concept, is it the same in every country? No. Equality as a concept, it is practiced in a same manner in every country? No. which means political theory also tries to examine how these principles are applied or they are operated in real world situation or real world institutions. That's the reason we need to study political theory. So now let us try to discuss how political theory can be put into practice. Practical applications of political theory. Now, political theory is not just an academic discipline where you have to, where students study in schools and colleges. No. Political theory as a discipline has practical applications in policy making. And who makes the policies? It is the government and the officials. So, political theory helps in framing laws, how the laws are to be framed, to draft a constitution, and so political theories help in making laws, drafting constitution, and what provides as a base? The ideas like justice, equality, freedom, they are very, very central, which means justice, liberty, equality are central to making policies. So whenever a policy or a law has to be made, these are the concepts that we think about or the policy makers think about whenever they frame a law or draft a constitution. Practical application of political theory. Now, if I talk about influence on laws and policies, right? For example, debate on freedom of expression. Freedom of expression. I can express, I can opine whatever I want to. Now, this debate on freedom of expression, this debate on freedom of expression influence laws on media regulation and censorship. For example, now we all know about the recent controversy about a YouTube show where one YouTube influencer, he uttered something very, very vulgar. The comments were distasteful. Now there is freedom of expression in our country. Now freedom of expression, does it mean you can do whatever you want to, whether you can express whatever you want to? No. If people are not respecting this concept, this right, then the government will try to regulate the media. The government will then dictate certain rules as in what the media can speak and what the media cannot speak. And then issues issues like economic disparity, right? Like economic inequality or affirmative action, that is reservations are given to, let's say, SCs and STs. So these issues like economic inequality, affirmative action, they stem from discussions on equality and social justice. Now, equality and social justice we study as part of political theory. Now, it is on the basis of these political theories and principles, the concepts or policies are framed to reduce economic inequality, or let's say to frame affirmative action for the welfare of the marginalized communities like the SCs and STs. Similarly, nationalism and secularism. For example, if a society is diverse, India is a diverse society. So what kind of political principles should be applicable and should work for a society as diverse as our country? Nationalism. Irrespective of the diversity, nationalism should hold the people together. Secularism, people should be allowed to practice their faith and the state should not intervene in their personal affairs. Now, these are the principles that forms the basis for the government to frame laws for a society as diverse as our India. And then role in critical thinking and civic awareness. This is for the citizens. Now, political theory, if you study political theory, enhances critical thinking and civic awareness, which means the citizens get aware of the political issues. Right? Now, for example, only when you study political theory, you understand the decisions the government is taking. For example, the government scrapped Article 370. The government framed 3 farm laws. The government bifurcated the state of Jammu and Kashmir and made 2 union territories. The issue in Manipur, the Naxalism issue, terrorism issue in Jammu and Kashmir. Only when you study political theory, you will be in a position to understand the decisions of the government and whether those decisions are good or bad for the society, and accordingly you participate in the democratic process or election or the electoral process. And fourth, empowerment through political education. So political theory, right? You study ethics, you study governance, political philosophies. All this political education, it prepares individual for what? Once you understand, once you have political education, it prepares individuals. It equips, it empowers an individual to question the government. We can question the government. Why the government is not acting against the disturbance in Manipur? There are so many railway accidents happen. Now there's a stampede in the New Delhi railway station. So you can ask the government why you failed, which led to the killing of so many people. We demand accountability from the government, and this is how the individuals can a contribute to the growth of a society or just society. This is how political theory can be put into practice. Again, the question is, now these are the points that we already have discussed. So let's have a quick reference to these points, as in why we have to study political theory. Now, many people think that political theory is only relevant for politicians or bureaucrats, or let's say the people who are studying law. No, it is even essential for citizens, irrespective of the fact that field you are choosing why? Because it enhances citizens, which means it empowers the citizens to understand about the decisions the government is taking. It encourages rational debate. For example, whether law should be made on religion. Now if I ask you, what's wrong if the government is making a law based on religion or based on caste? Now whether providing reservation on the basis of caste is a practical decision, is a logical decision, would it make change in the society? Would it lead to the growth of the society? Are you in a position to answer the question? No. That's the reason you have to study political theory, so that it encourages rational debate. You will be in a position to weigh the pros and cons, promotes ethical awareness. Now, the decisions the government takes should also be ethical. Why? Because politics is part of our day-to-day life. Decision the government makes with respect to education, employment, health, right? And that's the reason it is important, or it promotes ethical awareness, right? Understanding political concepts, it helps individuals recognize discrimination, inequality, and human rights violation. That's the reason you have to study political theory, so that you can promote ethical awareness, which means no law should be discriminatory, no law should lead to inequality, and no law should violate the human rights of individuals. And most importantly, if you study political theory, citizens can participate. And when citizens participate, right, then it leads to strengthening of democracy, which means democracy as a concept. What is democracy? People vote a government, people vote a leader, people elect a leader. So democracy grows and blossoms only when the citizens actively participate in governance or the electoral process. That's the reason it is important to study and political theory, and most importantly to address the modern challenges. Now, which are the modern challenges? We see digital privacy, right? We see digital privacy. Our personal data is being stolen by the cyber criminals. then we have global terrorism, we have climate change, we have economic inequality. All these modern challenges, be it economic inequality, global terrorism, climate change, all these modern challenges, it requires innovative solution, innovative solution. And that's the reason political theory is important to study, as it helps societies find solution to these problems. How? By providing ethical framework, ethical base on the basis of which law should be framed, policy insights. This is, and that's the reason we have to study political theory. I hope you understood the introduction to political theory. Now, students, let us understand the political theories one by one. We'll start with freedom. We'll start equality. Now we'll understand each and every political theory one by one. I hope you understood the basis or basics of political theory. What is political theory? Why is it important to study political theory? The practical application of political theory, how it enhances democracy or how it empowers a citizen. Now let us focus our attention to understand the concept of freedom, right? Now, freedom. Now, freedom as a concept, freedom as a concept has been at, or is the center or has been at the heart of many historical struggles. Has been at the center of many historical struggles. Since centuries, people have been fighting for freedom. And people across the world have fought for the right to govern themselves. What is freedom? Right to govern themselves. Right to govern themselves. Or govern themselves, to regulate themselves, or to express their thoughts, opinions, and to live without the domination of any person. This is what we understand by the concept of freedom. And for this, people have been fighting since not only years but centuries. And this desire for freedom, this desire or this fight for freedom, it represents fundamental human need. And what is that fundamental human need? The fight for freedom, it represents fundamental. And what is that human need? The human need is the opportunity to control one's life and destiny. Opportunity to control one's life and destiny. This is the fundamental human need, to control my own life without the domination of anyone. This is the significance of freedom. If I talk about some very famous examples when it comes to freedom, especially, we often invoke a great name, a great personality, Nelson Mandela. Right? His is an iconic example of struggle for freedom. In his resistance to apartheid, that is discrimination on the basis of race, color, he was willing to endure, or he endured great personal sacrifices. For example, he spent 27 years in jail. Or then we have our freedom fighters, be it Bhagat Singh, Chandrasekhar Azad, Mahatma Gandhi, all these freedom fighters. They sacrificed their lives. Why? only for one thing, that our country should be free. People should be free from the colonial domination. Or our neighboring country, Myanmar. Now, a democratic leader was elected in the name Aung San Suu Kyi. But since years, again, this lady since years has been fighting for only one thing, that is freedom. Why? Because Myanmar, since many years, almost 2 to 3 decades, has been ruled by military, and this military is supported by China. So this Nobel Prize awardee Aung San Suu Kyi, she to this date continues to fight for freedom. These political or these personalities, these figures that we just discussed, Nelson Mandela, Aung San Suu Kyi, Indian freedom fighters, they highlight the importance of freedom, not only as a right, but as a inherent need for living a dignified human life. Inherent need for living a dignified human life. Now, when we discuss about the concept of freedom, there are two dimensions. There are two different or two dimensions of freedom. One that is freedom from external constraints, which means no one should control us. And then the other dimension is freedom to express and develop one's own potential. Freedom to express and develop one's own potential. So one dimension is no one should control me. The other one, I should have the opportunity to develop myself. These are the two dimensions of freedom as understood by the political thinkers. Now the struggle for freedom, right? Still in many parts of the world, people are fighting for freedom. And this struggle involves challenging restrictions, especially restrictions imposed by the government, right? Which kind of restriction? For example, only the Indian citizens or citizens of a country get these many rights, right? Or let's say the social inequalities, restrictions imposed by the society, what kind of clothes you need to wear, what kind of clothes you cannot wear, or let's say the families. For example, whether you can marry a person outside your caste, outside your religion. So these are the restrictions that the society political system have been imposing on us. For example, the political system or our society does not allow the transgenders to marry. Now, initially, like before the Supreme Court's historic judgment, the rights of transgenders were not acknowledged. Were not acknowledged. But now, the transgenders or a person who is a transgender or let's say belonging to LGBTQ community can declare themselves to be belonging to the third gender, not male and female but third gender. Why? Because the Supreme Court has finally acknowledged the rights of transgenders, but these people still cannot marry. Why? Because this is a restriction imposed by the society. Restriction imposed by the society. Now, freedom, we all know, is universally celebrated as a human right. But freedom, balancing freedom with responsibility, it's a universally accepted human right. But to understand the full scope, of freedom requires an analysis of both negative as well as positive dimensions. To understand the full scope of freedom, we need to understand the negative and positive dimensions as well as which are the necessary social and legal limitation or constraints that ensure freedom of individuals is within a community, which means here we need to understand or we have to balance freedom with responsibility. Freedom does not give you the right to do whatever you want at the detriment of others or society. So here you need to understand both the dimensions, positive as well as negative dimensions of society, of freedom, so as to fully explore or understand the scope of freedom. So if we have to define freedom, what is a basic definition of freedom? What is the basic definition of freedom? The basic definition, or at its very simplest, freedom is defined as the absence of restrictions. Absence of restriction. No one should restrict or limit. According to this perspective, a person is free and they are not subject to external controls or force, and they can take decisions independently. This is at its simplest what we understand by the meaning of the word freedom. Absence of any sort of restrictions. Now let us try to understand the negative conception of freedom, because we discussed, to fully understand freedom, we need to understand the negative as well as the positive side. Now, what is the negative conception of freedom? Can you think about this negative conception? This negative conception, it highlights freedom from interference, where individuals freedom from so we discussed two dimensions of freedom. First, freedom from restrictions, freedom from interference, which means individuals are allowed to act in accordance with their own will and no external force can control. No external force can limit the freedom of a person. But freedom is beyond the absence of restrictions or constraints. Understanding freedom merely as the absence of restriction is not complete. Why? Because the freedom also involves the expansion of opportunities. Expansion of opportunities, and also to express themselves, to develop their capabilities. This is the second dimension, that is the positive dimension of freedom, which means first there should be no interference. The second positive dimension is to have many opportunities, and then to have the required institutions or support of the society so that I can develop my capabilities. I can develop my capability. This is beyond absence of constraints, which means a society is considered free when it provides conditions that allows its members to develop their full potential. Only then a society is considered free, when it provides you the conditions so that the people of that society can develop their full potential. And this form of freedom, it pushes individuals to engage in creative activities and also pursue their ambitions, and finally shape their future, shape their destiny. This is the positive concept of freedom, positive concept of freedom, which means balancing constraints and opportunities, that is balancing negative and positive. It requires both the absence of unnecessary restrictions and the creation of conditions. Why? So as to allow individuals to flourish. To allow individuals to flourish. So what is real freedom then? What is real freedom? Which means when we discuss about freedom, the real freedom is a society that imposes no constraints, no restrictions, but offers no opportunities for education or employment. Is this the meaning of freedom? That there are no restrictions as well as no opportunities for education or employment. Would this be real freedom? No. But a society that imposes certain restrictions and also providing opportunities for growth, this can be considered to be real freedom, which means Let's say for example, there is a society where there are no restrictions, absolutely no restrictions, and the society has, or the society is not providing you anything. For example, what do I do of freedom? What do I do of freedom when I do not have the capability? So let's say for example, if I have, let's say, if I'm a literate person, if I learn, if I educate myself, now this education will help me to take decisions as per my potential or abilities. Now education is helping me to decide in which career, which field I should be making a career in. This is what education is giving me. But what if the state is not providing education? What does a person do of the freedom when he does not have the potential capability to do something good out of the freedom that he has? That's the reason a real freedom is where the society is imposing certain restrictions, at the same time providing opportunities for growth so that a person can unwind his potential. This is what we understand by the word real freedom, which means society is putting restriction. For example, my freedom does not give me the right to harm the other person, does not give me the right to hurt the other person. My freedom does not allow me to restrict a person from growing. But the society is giving or providing conditions, providing a favorable condition so that everyone can prosper. This is what we understand by the word real freedom. Now let us discuss about the social constraints or restrictions. Now, the first one, the relationship between individual and society. Now, no individual can enjoy complete freedom from all the restrictions. It's not possible. It's not practical. For example, a society as diverse as a country, which means different people will have different ambitions, right? The resources required will be different, the ideas will be different. So if people have different ideas, different perception, different ideas, this will lead to conflict, and this will lead to conflict. As a reason, restrictions help maintain order and ensure peaceful coexistence of different types of people, different categories of people. Relationship between individual and the society. And to establish order in the society, we need social order, which means, why do we need social constraints? Because the differences, people differ in their opinions. There's competition for resources, and then when it comes to making choices, or let's say interests, the interests at times can also be conflicting. That's the reason constraints in the form of rules, laws, judicial decisions can regulate these differences or manage the differences in the society so as to maintain social peace. So constraints, they manage the conflicts, right, between different classes of people. They mediate the differences and promote cooperation, which means this limitation will prevent an individual from interfering in the freedom of other person, interfering in the freedom of other person. But but the question is, can the society, can the government impose any sort of restrictions? No. Unjust social constraints or restrictions are not accepted. Not all the constraints or restrictions are fair. Some are based on arbitrary distinctions. For example, the restrictions on the basis of race, gender, religion, caste, they are unjust. They are unjust. So unjust restrictions must be removed. Why? To ensure equality and justice. To ensure equality and justice. And to ensure that people are enjoying their freedoms. The state plays a very important role. The state plays a very important role to enforce a limitation. But which type of state? A dictator state or a democratic state? A state which is elected by the people, which means a democratic state can guarantee to safeguard the freedom of people. How? By ensuring that the laws respect the rights of all citizens while maintaining order. Laws respect the rights of all citizens while ensuring that there is order in the society. Which means constraints must be reasonable and justified. The constraints cannot be arbitrary. The constraints have to be justified and just. For example, restrictions on the basis of arbitrary distinction, race, religion is not accepted. Right? And restriction placed on the basis of the fact that if we restrict the freedom of one person, right? For example, I do not have the freedom to kill other person. Having no restriction, which means I can do whatever I want to. Which means every person has a right to do whatever they want to, which will lead to chaos in the society. So restrictions are important, but the restrictions should be just. Now let us try to understand the harm principle. Now, the proponent of this harm principle of freedom is John Stuart Mill. He is the proponent of this harm principle. Now, this principle is a cornerstone of political theory and provides a framework. Is a cornerstone, is the central of political theory and provides a framework for understanding when it is justified to restrict individual freedom. So, this harm principle tells you the situation when the freedom of a person can be restricted. When to restrict an individual's freedom. Now there are two concepts. One is self-regarding, the other one is other regarding actions, which means according to John Stuart Mill, the only valid reason for restricting a person's liberty is to prevent harm to others. Only reason for restricting a person's liberty so that he should not harm others. This Mill distinguishes between self-regarding action and other regarding action. What is self-regarding action? Now, self-regarding action, which means such as, let's say, personal choices about how to dress, what to eat, whom to marry, should not be interfered with. Why? Because this is not harming anyone. This is not harming the society. So I should have the right to dress whatever I want to, whatever I want to eat, whomever I want to marry, and this the society should not interfere with. This is self-regarding action, right? Now, what is other regarding action? Which means that if my actions are harming others, action that harm others, such as, let's say, if I'm stealing something, theft, right? If I'm inciting people, that is leading to violence, or if I'm defaming someone by uttering something very bad about some other person, then such restrictions are justifiable. I hope you understood what is self-regarding actions, that is not causing any harm to the society, and other regarding action, that is causing harm to the society. Now, states rule. This harm principle, it highlights the fact that state's role is not to regulate personal choices. Personal choices, the state has to leave it to that person. Unless the choice that a person is making is harming others. So this principle to seek balance between individual freedom with the protection of others' right and well-being. This is what, or this is where the state has a very important role to play to balance individual freedom and the rights of the society or safety of the society. So in practice, it is not as simple as it looks like. It is not simple as it looks like. Determining what constitutes harm and when intervention is justified can be very complicated. For example, let's say minor nuisance, minor disturbance such as playing loud music may cause inconvenience, but they do not cause significant harm and should not lead to legal intervention. In contrast, action that cause serious harm such as hate speech, I'm inciting people against a particular religion, against a particular caste, this should invite legal restrictions. This should invite legal restrictions. For example, uh, again, this is very complicated when religion is involved, because for some religion XYZ things are allowed and for some other religion XYZ things are not allowed. But let's say, for example, for Muslims, pork is banned, is prohibited. For Muslims, pork is prohibited, but for other religions, it's not prohibited. So what if people from other religion are eating, and let's say eating in an environment where which is dominated by the Muslims? That's the reason it is very complicated. That's the reason it is very complicated. For example, the Muslims, right, through speakers, they uh, you know, like the namaz that they offer, right, is done through speakers. So the main priest, the Maulvi, he recites certain texts from the holy text. But this recitation, is it causing harm to people? Again, is very complicated to decide. Now let us discuss what is negative liberty and positive liberty. It's the same as the two dimensions of liberty that we have discussed, right? So what is negative liberty? First we'll understand what is negative liberty, which means absence of external interference. It focuses on protecting individuals' right to act according to their own will and no interference from the state or society. And the core idea is that individuals should have minimum area of freedom in which they are free from the intervention of external authorities. This is often referred to as freedom from external restrictions. In positive liberty, this focuses on the capacity to act freely. It is concerned with creating the conditions that allow the individuals to achieve their full potential. Right? So positive liberty, it focuses on the role of society in providing opportunities for education and healthcare, which means this, why this is called negative liberty, because an individual's freedom can restrict the freedom of other individuals. But here in positive liberty, there are restrictions, which means every person is allowed to enjoy freedom or liberty in his own capacity. My freedom should not allow, right, should not allow me to restrict the rights or freedom of other person. This is the difference between negative liberty and positive liberty. I hope you understood both the concepts, right? Now let us understand another term, that is freedom of expression. Freedom to speak whatever I want to say. This is one of the most fundamental aspects of freedom. What is it? Freedom of expression, the right to voice one's opinion, my beliefs, my ideas, without fearing, or let's say without fearing of censorship. This freedom of expression is integral to a free society. It is very important in a free society. Why? Because it allows individuals to participate in the public discourse. It allows individuals to challenge the government and also most importantly, it also allows an individual to promote change, which means I have the right to speak whatever I want to. I have the right to speak or express my ideas unfiltered. This is what we understand by the term freedom of expression, which is very integral to a free society. But allowing unhindered freedom of expression, what would be the consequence? Which means, let's say I'm saying something about the state which can go against the interests of a state. Or does this freedom give me the right to speak against my country and praise India's enemy? Does this right give me the freedom to praise Pakistan and, let's say, defame India? No, there are limitations of freedom of expression, which means this freedom of expression is not absolute. There are limitations, especially when the speech, my expression, my speech is leading to violence in the society. Violence in the society. For example, if I speak something really bad about a particular religion, about a particular caste, this is not allowed. I cannot speak against the interests of my country. And what did John Stuart Mill, or what were his views on freedom of expression? Now he defended freedom of expression. His concept is based on the idea that truth emerges through the conflict of opposing views. Truth emerges out of conflicting views. Truth emerges out of conflicting views. So therefore, even controversial or offensive ideas should be allowed to be expressed. This is what John Stuart Mill, his view on freedom of expression are. Let it be controversial, let it be offensive. Why? Because truth will only emerge when there are opposing ideas. When there are opposing ideas. That's the reason he said that let there be no restriction on or limited restriction freedom of expression. Right? So as long as the freedom of expression do not cause harm to others, again this is very controversial. This is very controversial in context of censorship. How? Now what is censorship? Which means, let's say the government does not like a book. Why? Because this book is defaming or showing the government or a country in negative light. For example, at times in movies or let's say in books, our country is shown in a very negative light. What the government does is, the government does not allow such movies to be aired, or such scenes cannot be shown in the theaters. Now some argue that certain expressions should be restricted for social peace. Some say that restrictions are important for social peace, while others say that people should be free to express even if the ideas can be or may be offensive or unpopular. Because let's say my freedom of expression may harm the other person. This is what we see in our day-to-day lives. For example, people, now when Article 370 was abrogated, which gave special status to Jammu and Kashmir, there were people who supported Article 370. Why? Because they say that Jammu and Kashmir was not the only state that was given special privilege. There are many states along with Jammu and Kashmir that is given special privilege. So what's wrong if Jammu and Kashmir is also given a special status? The others say that no. Article 370 or this special privilege should not be given to Jammu and Kashmir. Why? Because it goes against the principle of equality. If a special privilege is given to a state, it should be given to each and every state. And if it is not given to others, it should also not be given to Jammu and Kashmir. Some people say that it is because of Article 370 there is terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir. Some people say that it is because of the dilution, because of poor implementation of Article 370 that led to the rise in militancy. So this is how contentious or problematic it is. I hope you understood the concept of freedom of expression, right? Now students, let us understand another political theory or concept, that is equality. What is equality is a question. Now again, equality is a fundamental moral and political idea. It supports or it advocates that all individuals, right, they are they like they possess equal worth, dignity, rights. So everyone are equal irrespective of their race, gender, caste, religion, nationality, it doesn't matter. It does not simply mean that identical treatment will be given to all the sections of the society. Let's say SC, ST, general category. Equality doesn't mean that we are treating everyone same. No, but it ensures that no one is discriminated against based on some arbitrary characteristics, which means no one is discriminated on the basis of religion or caste. This is not the concept of equality, right? Which means that the demand for equality has driven many social movements, and this throughout history. For example, if I talk about the historical significance, we have the French Revolution. Now, French Revolution championed the slogan of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Or the anti-colonial struggles seen in many parts of the world, including India. Anti-colonial struggles, right? These anti-colonial struggles fought for civil rights movement and the fight against caste-based discrimination. So, this idea of equality stems from the historical events, and these historical movements have influenced the constitutional and legal frameworks, which means based on the experience of the past, that is in history, it actually helped to draft our constitution, or let's say the laws. For example, based on the past experience where untouchability was practiced, this practice was considered unequal, discriminatory, and this past experience, historical experience, helped us to make a law that bans, prohibits untouchability. For example, Article 17 of the Indian Constitution, it prohibits untouchability. Now, equality as a concept is universally accepted, irrespective of the fact that equality is universally accepted, inequality remains present, right? For example, economic inequality, access to education is not the same, access to healthcare is not the same. For example, the slums. Now, many of the slums, they exist alongside the luxury housing. For example, in Mumbai, where the celebrities live, right? Now, adjoining these luxury places, we have so many slums, which means though the world acknowledges the importance of equality, unfortunately, inequality is present in major parts of the world. In majority parts of the world, inequality persists. This is rather very, very unfortunate. Now, such inequalities persist. Why? Due to historical injustices, or let's say the system, the government is being biased or acting in a biased manner. Now, if we discuss or understand the difference between just and unjust difference, right? Just and unjust differences. Now, some differences like those based on merit, occupation, or let's say expertise are considered fair, which means the which means only a person who clears the UPSC examination becomes an IAS officer. Now, this difference is fair. But the inequalities based on race, gender, they are unjust. They are unjust. For example, you cannot deny education or employment to a person. Why? Because he is coming from a poor social background, poor economic background, or let's say backward social background. This is unjust. So, just and unjust difference. Now, how do we address inequality? Now, natural inequalities such as differences in physical abilities are inherent. For example, the physical strength of men and women is different, that is accepted. But the social inequalities are constructed by society and this can be rectified. This can be rectified. The policies, the constitutional provisions, the laws made by the institutions of a country which aim at equal access at resources. Everyone should have equal access to resources. Affirmative action, for example, reservation to people who are historically backward, socially backward, right? So the constitutional provisions and the laws that the government frames can actually address the inequalities present in the society. Now, let us discuss the three dimensions of society. Which are the three dimensions of society? Political equality, social equality, and economic inequality are the three dimensions of society, three dimensions of equality. Now, these dimensions, political, social, and economic, they address different aspects of human life and work together to create a just and fair society. Let us try to understand what is political equality first. Now, political equality ensures that all individuals have equal legal rights. Equal legal rights. And which are the equal legal rights? For example, right to vote, freedom of speech, or let's say freedom of forming association, Article 19 of the Indian Constitution. This political equality is the foundation of democracy. It ensures equal citizenship because irrespective whether you're a rich person or a poor person, you have the right to vote. This is fundamental to the concept of democracy. But what is the point of political equality when there is no social and economic equality? So if we do not have these rights, this right becomes totally meaningless, totally useless. For example, the individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds who do not have access to education or healthcare. These people may struggle to participate meaningfully. Why? Because they do not know whom to vote and why to vote. These people have, I mean, the political parties, they give them money during the elections, and this is how the political parties, they get the votes. So, in order to understand which political person to or which political party to vote, now see in India, we usually elect a political party. For example, we have National Congress and BJP. So, in between Narendra Modi and Rahul Gandhi, whichever person we like, we go and vote to that political party. But let's say in your region or area, if there's a problem that the citizens are facing, are Modi and Rahul Gandhi going to come and help you? No. Which means if you have education, you will see which local candidate is contesting the election. You will verify his educational background, social background, and then vote. This is the advantage of education or social and economic equality. Second is social equality. Now, social equality emphasizes equal access to essential social goods. Which are the social goods? Education, healthcare, or let's say housing, this is social equality. This is social. Now, societies which are not equal, the people who come from poor background, the marginalized groups, women, Dalits, minorities may face systematic barriers. Why? Because of, let's say, social and cultural, let's say, people can face discrimination. Why? Because the systemic, which means the policies of the government may at times promote, let's say, inequality, or it creates barriers to participation in social and cultural life. So, true social equality, which means we have to remove all the barriers and ensure that all these social goods are accessed by each and every section of the society. This is what we understand by the term social equality, which means no discrimination on the basis of religion, caste, etc. And economic equality, which means there has to be fair distribution of wealth. Fair distribution of wealth. For example, in India, 10% of the Indians, they own 90% of the country's wealth. This is economic inequality. There is no fair distribution of wealth. So economic inequality, which means there has to be fair distribution of wealth, or let's say resources. But here you see the wealthy Indians have control over the resources. Now, some economic inequality is often accepted. Societies must ensure that individuals have opportunities to improve their status. For example, two people cannot be the same. A person who has the potential will work hard, will rise up the ladder. So, this person should also have the opportunity to improve his status. How? By seeking education, and by getting meaningful employment. Right? Economic this is economic inequality. So political equality, social equality, and economic equality are the three dimensions of equality. Now we'll understand the concept of feminism and equality. Now, first, difference between sex and gender. Now see, the feminism, this ideology challenges gender inequalities. They advocate that men and women should have equal rights and opportunities. They argue that the inequalities between men and women is not based on inherent biological differences, which means they believe that the inequalities between men and women is because, or is the result of society, or the social constructed norms, or the patriarchal system, which means the inequalities is not based on the inherent biological differences. Now, what are the inherent biological differences? Now, the feminists, people who advocate for the rights of the women or who fight for equal rights, they distinguish between sex and gender. What is sex? Sex is nothing but it's a biological difference. It's a biological difference, that is male and female. It's a biological difference. Gender is a socially constructed, or this is a socially constructed term. This is a socially constructed term. Sex is natural. Gender, which is a socially constructed norm, is not inherent. So, for example, which are the inherent, let's say, inherent differences or biological differences? For example, only women have the ability to bear children. Just because only a woman can bear children, this should not justify limiting women to only the household chores or domestic rules. No. On the basis of just biological difference, a woman should not be limited, which means she should also have the opportunity to explore and unwind her potential and contribute meaningfully to the growth of the society. For example, the traditional societal norms, right? Traditionally, or even to this date, right? Many people confine women to the private sphere, that is home, cooking food, raising children, looking after the family. while men have dominated, or men are allowed to dominate the public sphere. The feminists are those people who seeks to dismantle this divide between what the society think and what an individual wants. They ensure equal participation for women in all aspects of life. This is what the feminists fight for. Now let us try to understand the difference between Marxist view on equality and liberal view on equality. Now, there are two important political ideologies that address the issue of equality. Which are these two ideologies? Marxism and liberalism. Now, Marxism sees economic inequality as a root cause of all other inequalities. Economic inequality. So, economic inequality is a root cause, which means it is because of economic inequality there are other inequalities like political inequality, social inequality, etc. The Marxists, Karl Marx, argued that private ownership of the means of production it leads to class divisions and exploitation. Private ownership, for example, I am owning this land, then I also occupy the land of others. This is what the zamindars, landholders did in the past. The zamindari system, ryotwari system, mehelwari system that we discuss in history. This led to private ownership of means of production, private ownership of land, which means now we have people who have land, money, and people who do not have land and money. There are class divisions, rich and the poor. So the rich person is exploiting the poor person. This person has nothing, he cannot feed his family. And Marxists, they say that if we want to achieve true equality, then we have to fight for collective ownership of resources, collective ownership of resources, which means the resources should not be privately owned. The concept of private ownership should not exist. Whatever resources are there in the society should belong to the society, and this will only lead to abolition of class structure. This will only lead to abolition of class divisions. This is what Marxist people argue, that economic inequality is at the root of all other inequalities. Now, liberalism as a political ideology, they accept inequality as a natural outcome. What they say, that inequality is the natural outcome of competition. If there is a competition, let's say you people are studying to pass the UPSC CSE examination. The person who clears, he becomes an IS officer. The person who does not clear, he might land up doing some of the other job. So here you see the inequality is a natural outcome of competition. Liberals argue that as long as competition is fair and individuals have equal opportunities, inequality in wealth and status is justified. If the competition is fair, the individuals are given equal opportunities, inequalities in wealth and status are justified. All what the state can do is, the state can ensure that each and every person has access to resources, healthcare, housing, so that using these opportunities he can change his status, social status, economic status. Which means here Marxists, they do not justify inequality. Liberals, they justify inequality, stating that it is very natural that inequality exists in a free society. Right? Now, the question is, given that our own country has so many inequalities, our country experiences inequalities politically, socially, economically, what is the solution? How do we promote equality? How do we promote equality? First is affirmative actions, that is in the form of reservation. For example, the people who are historically disadvantaged, for example, the tribals and the Dalits. So, policies like reservation or quotas in education and employment, it provides equal opportunities to the historically disadvantaged community. Now, these policies like reservation and quotas have sparked debate, right? Now, critics argue that such measures, they actually perpetuate reverse discrimination, which means now we are trying to promote the SCs and STs at the cost of general people. Tomorrow, a situation may arise where the SCs and STs are dominating and the general people are in minority. This will perpetuate reverse discrimination, the critics argue. So, affirmative action is so far is not efficient, but it is actually helping the marginalized communities change their status, right? Now, if I talk about social policies, right? Now, state can implement social policies, and through this, they can address the social and economic inequalities. For example, the state right to education. Right to education allows anyone to get free education. Healthcare, Ayushman Bharat allows the poor people to access secondary and tertiary healthcare. Then Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana allows the poor people to have housing, or housing at a very affordable price, or free housing by the government, particularly for the disadvantaged groups. The next is equality through differential treatment. How? Through differential treatment, which means in some cases it is necessary to treat people differently to achieve true equality. Example, the disabled individuals, the Divyangs, the disabled individuals, the Divyangs, right, may require special accommodations. Why you cannot place the Divyangs and people who are economically, politically and physically well off at the same level? So, the Divyang people may require special accommodations to ensure they have equal justice or equal access to public spaces, or let's say education. So, through this measures or policies, we can promote equality. We can promote equality. I hope you understood the concept of equality as well. So, we understood the concept of political theory. What is political theory? Why do we need to study political theory? We understood the concept of freedom. We are also understood the concept of equality, right?